Welcome, everyone. My name is Melinda Verdanier, and I am the Grants Coordinator at the South Dakota Humanities Council. And I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our council, which produces the annual Festival of Books. And we're so pleased that you've joined us for this virtual 2021 event. We'd like to acknowledge first and foremost that this program comes to you from ground, which is the homeland of the Oceti-Sakowin, the Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota people. The South Dakota Humanities Council honors and appreciates the Indigenous people who have the longest relationship to this place. Before our event gets underway, I'd like to share some housekeeping details. We ask that you keep your microphone muted throughout the event to minimize background noise. If you'd like to ask questions or share comments with today's presenter, please type them in the chat section on Zoom, which you can open by clicking on the conversation bubble at the bottom of your screen, or in the comments section on Facebook. We will pass along as many as possible at the end of the session. If you wish, we will also allow you to unmute at the end of the session so you can ask your questions directly. We encourage you to buy books by our presenting authors at your local independent bookstore. Our official festival booksellers are Books A Million and the Birdcage Bookstore and Mercantile, both in Rapid City. You can also buy directly from authors and publishers. Look for the links that I'll placed in the chat. To help us continue to improve the festival, we'd appreciate your filling out an evaluation form. We'll share a link in the chat section of Zoom, and we'll also email you a link to the survey at the conclusion of the festival. Finally, you can help keep the festival free by making a tax-deductible donation to the South Dakota Humanities Council. Just visit our website, sdhumanities.org, and click on the donate button. This festival would not be possible without the generous support of the numerous organizations and individuals who've already donated and are acknowledged on the back cover of our festival guide. And you can also find all of the information on our website. And now let's get on with our show. This program is called The Secret Stories of Dakota Grandmas and features James Solheim. James has written books that explore the wackiest foods on earth and explain Santa's sleigh technology. Dolly Parton's Imagination Library gave away nearly 500,000 of his books free to preschoolers, and the Wall Street Journal and PBS included his first book in their lists of best sellers for getting boys to read. Solheim's latest book, Grandmas Are Greater Than Great, explores a family's history through 10 generations of grandmotherly love. First, we'll hear from James, and then I can ask any questions that you have provided in the chat, and we'll continue with our discussion from there. So now I'll turn the program over to James.
Hello, I'm going to put on screen share. So it's great to be here, and thanks for organizing this, and thank you for the extra work everybody had to do to make this an online festival. It's been really fun to watch the other events and the other authors and illustrators speaking on this. Well, these are some of my my books here. It's Disgusting and We Ate It was my first book ever about unusual foods around the world and throughout history. And my most recent book is Grandmas Are Greater Than Great. And I'm just now finishing the art because I'm the illustrator for my next book, Eat Your Woolly Mammoths, which you can actually order now from HarperCollins or your individual independent bookstore. And then some of my other books are over there to the side. Well, if you were driving on a dirt road through North or South Dakota and you saw a building like this, you might think, well, maybe a family lived there, maybe there was a grandma and her children and grandchildren lived there, maybe they passed it on, and there were a few people that lived in this house, but you would never suspect what really happened here because it was a one-room schoolhouse. So there were actually hundreds or thousands of grandmas that were children in this building, which is a one-room schoolhouse called the Thelma Schoolhouse near Driscoll, North Dakota. It's where my mom went to school back when she didn't have electricity in her house. And it's probably where her mom went to school, although she's not totally sure. Well, when I was researching my book, Grandmas Are Greater Than Great, I started realizing that there are a lot more grandmas out there than I ever suspected, and they have a lot more stories than I ever suspected, and that one building can be the source of far more stories than any would have thought. So to think that this one old house that's still there, because this photograph was taken just a couple of months ago, to think that there's so much history in this one building is just amazing to me. In fact, this is near Driscoll, North Dakota. My grandma's the same age as Arabelle Thompson, who was one of the founders of Ebony magazine. And she lived on a farm near my grandma when she was going to that one-room schoolhouse. And the Norwegian farmers that lived near Arabelle's family, this was when there were often droughts and problem in just getting your food when you lived on a farm in the Dakotas back then. One of the Norwegian farmers that was from my grandma's part of the countryside came over and just suddenly dropped off some food, some grain for her family so that they could survive as farmers in North Dakota in the early 20th century. So as you drive by that old house on a dirt road in North Dakota that's far from even a small town, you wouldn't imagine that, oh yeah, hundreds of grandmas had their origins in this building. Arabelle Thompson, a founder of Ebony magazine, lived in this area. Well, so that's where my family originated, near Driscoll, North Dakota. I was born in Kensal, North Dakota. We moved when I was 4 to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And this is my brother and sister enjoying some of their early transportation. My brother's dressed up for Viking days because my dad taught at Augustana, and we lived right across the street from Augustana College. My sister was about 2 in this picture. And you would see a kid like this today, maybe across the street from Augustana in Sioux Falls, and think, oh, what a cute little kid. But would you dream that that's the same girl that's this grandma right here? So my sister, who was riding her trike across the street from Augustana College in about 1963-64, now has this family, and these little children here are her grandchildren, and she lives in the Twin Cities right now. We, my wife and I, don't live in Sioux Falls because I moved on with my family to other places. But when we were, after we were married, we gradually worked our way back toward the Dakotas, and we actually lived in Vermilion when our first child was about 2 years old. My wife taught at USD. She was in the medical program there. She's a cancer immunologist. So I brought my little 2-year-old to the Shrine to Music really often because our family is very interested in music and has a background in music. My family that lived near Driscoll, North Dakota, played for local dances because back then every dance had live music, fiddlers that would come to town and fiddle for everybody that wanted to do the waltzes and the polkas and some dances that you've never heard of if you're of that kind of background. Well, the Shrine to Music, it's this great place that everybody should go to. If you haven't been there, it's fantastic. And you know, it started because some guy in South Dakota was in World War II and started trading Spam for musical instruments overseas, and he brought them back, got a collection going, and pretty soon he needed a place to keep all of his instruments. Pretty soon, after they made a deal with USD to start the Shrine to Music, which is now the National Music Museum, people started donating instruments, and they have a lot of stuff there that's just been donated by essentially grandmas from South Dakota. When I lived in Vermilion, the music club got to tour the basements and the storage areas of the Shrine to Music, which is what it was called then, and they had three glass harps there, which are homemade instruments made of glasses partially filled with water. So somebody had made this instrument in just a regular home in South Dakota, probably, and donated it to the museum after that grandma passed on, or whatever happened in that family. But those instruments weren't on display, they're just in storage. So there's so many things that we don't see in the world that are important to the families that we haven't met, that we might be driving by on the street in Sioux Falls or Vermilion or Rapid City or Deadwood, or if we're driving by on a little old dirt road like the one where my mother and grandma went to elementary school. Now these are in the middle here, Melanie Huff, Melanie Huff and Judy Huff, they're from Brookings, and they helped start the Shrine to Music when they were college students at USD. Well, Judy on the right here, she went on to write something called shape note music, which you might not have heard of, and shape note music is music that's written in shapes like this. It's part of an American tradition that most people don't know about, but she's the #1 composer that's still living that people sing in shapes. This is her most famous tune, and I was singing this the other day because I sing shape note music. I was singing it with somebody in Great Britain because online we're singing music from all over the world. And this started with somebody in Brookings, went to college at USD in Vermilion, helped build the Shrine to Music collection, went on to Chicago, found out about shape note music, started writing it, and now people are singing it all over the world. And it really just started with somebody that was a kid in South Dakota. Now, to get back to my family, this is a rusty old car on my grandparents' farm in North Dakota. You can see a slough in the background. Well, if you're driving along in the back streets of, not streets, the dirt roads of North or South Dakota, and you see a car like this, you probably think, well, yeah, that's just the car of an average family. Who knows what happened to them? They probably just lived on the farm, didn't do anything except farm. Well, my grandpa's sister was married to a guy that lived on the next farm over named Arnold Christensen. So there's another grandma in our family. She was married to this guy that substituted for Lawrence Welk, the old-time music leader from North Dakota who started out in North Dakota. And my great aunt's husband would substitute for him, and he would also travel around North Dakota giving concerts of his own, and he played on the radio. He had a radio program every week. And this car that you see, that's a car from somewhere in the family history that you might not even have dreamed led to anything other than a rusty old car somewhere. And this is a hardanger fiddle from the family. So people from, of Norwegian background, they would take these fiddles and play for local dances in this old-time Norwegian tradition. There are probably hundreds of those in various places throughout South and North Dakota. And you might think that, well, that's just a strange old fiddle in the back room, but it's history from a family, and it's grandmas dancing with grandpas in 1906, 1910, 1920, dances that are now forgotten. And so that's the kind of thing that I started thinking about when I was writing my book, Grandmas Are Greater Than Great. Here's a lady from just over the line in Minnesota. She's the last person who knows how to do the piano accompaniment with this certain style of Norwegian fiddling. And there's the last, he's no longer living, but that was the last fiddler from his little area just over the line in Minnesota, Harold Sorensen. And of course, one of my favorite writers, Louise Erdrich, she wrote this really funny, playful book called Grandmother's Pigeon, in addition to the books that you probably already know about. Well, what if you were driving along in South Dakota and you saw these people on the road? You might think, oh yeah, typical South Dakotans, but they're actually these really interesting people that are the parents to this fantastic writer. And she's actually an artist. He just died in the last year or so. So everywhere you go, there's just stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. These people that you see have so much to themselves that you wouldn't suspect. This is a rug that my grandma made. She was known as the local person that you bring clothing to when it's worn out, and she would make rugs and quilts and so forth out of those rugs and out of those worn out pieces of clothing. And often she would give the rug back to the family. So every one of these rugs is a historical piece of North Dakota, basically. It's clothing that came from people's lives, went into her house, and she turned it into an artwork. These are some ones that stayed in the family, but a lot of these are out where we don't even know where they are. So if you see this rug somewhere on the floor being walked on, or a rug like it, it's the history of lots of different families that came together in their old pieces of clothing, and somebody made it into an artwork, basically. So that's the history behind my book, Grandmas Are Greater Than Great. I thought about all these things, and I thought, how can you fit grandmas into a picture book? At the time, I thought 32 pages, because picture books for children are virtually always 32 pages. So I sent a manuscript to my editor, assuming it was 32. She thought, grandmas can't fit into only 32 pages, so she made it 40. Well, as if 40 is enough either, it's not. My idea was to cover more than 200 years of one family. It's not really my family. I wanted to make this as wide-ranging as possible within one family, basically. And so I took one person, one grandma from over 200 years ago, and then each page spread in the book goes to the next generation. So every page spread of 2 pages, when you open the book, shows a grandma, and the next page spread shows the next grandma in the family, and it goes on throughout the book up until actually beyond present days, because I thought of the last scene as being about 5 years from now, let's say. Books always start with something that the author has revised, and the editor has usually told the author to make a lot of changes. My past editor, Jill Santopolo with Penguin, told me one time that of all the books she's ever been working on, she's only seen one picture book that didn't need revision. A manuscript got sent to her and she actually said, wow, I love it this way. I'm going to just publish it like this. So as usual, I had to make a lot of changes, rethink my concept for the book, and here's how it starts in the final version. Illustrated by Derek Desierto, whose previous book was a New York Times bestseller. You come from grandmas of grandmas of grandmas of grandmas, going back thousands of years. You needed them all for you to be you. Many grandmas ago, one great, 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 great grandma held a baby day and night, hugging her back to health. And when the child was well again, they both wore big red hollyhock flowers for hats to celebrate, and the baby let out her first laugh. That baby grew up to be your great, 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 great grandma. That grandma was a pioneer and didn't even own a shoe. She had heard of electricity but didn't believe in it. She had survived a war, so fevers didn't scare her. She fanned mosquitoes away from her baby even in her sleep, her hands sweeping time to her snores. That baby grew up to be your great, 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 great grandma. That grandma dreamed of her baby all grown up and fancy in a house with real glass windows. Maybe she'd even be a teacher in her own one-room school, drawing alphabets in a sunbeam swirled with chalk dust. Then the baby broke the family's only bowl and woke that grandma from the dream. That baby grew up to be your great, 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 great grandma. That grandma knew how to milk a goat and fix a wagon wheel. She knew how to rope a calf, but she couldn't get that misbehaving cloth to be a diaper, so she put her newborn baby's bottom in a bonnet and showed her the stars. That baby grew up to be your great, 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 great grandma. That grandma cuddled her baby in a sleigh, whooshing across a frozen lake. At the lake's far end, an old woman sewed blossoms made of cloth into a quilt. Nobody could fool her into talking to a machine. She pulled that ringing telephone box off the wall and donated it to the chickens. When her family arrived, she sat snoring and swatting flies in her sleep. She woke to find her new great-great-grandbaby in her arms. That baby grew up to be your great-great-great-grandma. That grandma danced with her baby across the grass, laughing and laughing under the town's first streetlights. Lamps on poles really could light a town. When the stars grew bright, Grandma and baby rode to their cousin's house for the baby's first taste of gooseberry pie. That baby grew up to be your great-great-grandma. That grandma took her kids fishing every day so all 7 of them could eat. She led them through fields, digging potatoes the harvesters had overlooked. She stuffed a room from floor to ceiling with potatoes to feed her family through the winter. They needed every one. And she still found time to have baby number 8, the exact baby you needed for you to someday be you. That baby grew up to be your great-grandma. That grandma listened to the radio with her baby and twirled with her baby among the tall trees, giving her baby baths just to keep her in a world of love and bubbles and no wars. After hundreds of baths, she turned the radio on and hollered with joy at what she heard, hugging her baby up out of the water and running outside to find someone, anyone who could tell her if it was true. The war was over. That baby grew up to be your grandma. That grandma swung her baby high up out of the crowd. Sitting on strong, slender shoulders, the child could see everything now, from sun to storm clouds to the band's loud guitars. It was like being the world's tallest person. When the rain came, the concert ended, but not their dancing. This was the baby's first chance ever to splash in rain and drink it straight from the sky. That baby grew up to be your mother. Your mother was about to meet someone for the first time, someone who had never seen light or tasted air, someone who didn't know how to walk, talk, or even breathe. Your mother had so much to teach and share, and so many hugs built up inside her, just waiting. Tiny hands reached out to her from a nurse's arms. Click, 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 click. Pictures flew at millions of miles an hour to far-off phones, igniting instant cheers. Someone had arrived. You! And who are you? You're a hollyhock hat and a grandma's snore, a gleeful squeal scattering chalk dust dreams, a baby's bare bottom in a bonnet under stars, a giggle and a gurgle blossoming from a quilt, a gooseberry pucker in a candlelit kitchen, a potato-stuffed room, and a soapy shout of joy, a dance in the rain, and a mother's first hug. One hug among millions that took thousands of years to add up to you. So that's my book about grandmas so far, but I'm writing more grandma books. That was a book that goes vertically through one family, you might say. I've now written a grandma book that's not at the editor yet, even. It's about grandmas around the world, and it ends with this map. This is only one continent from the map, so you can see it better. But I researched words for grandma around the world. The world speaks more than 6,000 languages, and in some places only one person remains who can speak a whole language, and that person is usually a grandma. The final world map will include 100 worldwide words for grandma with pronunciations, and a lot of you are probably familiar with the Native American words for grandma that nearly died out, and thanks to some of the elder members of South Dakota's Native peoples and elsewhere, those native languages have not died out. It's true of Africa too. There's some famous African languages where they use clicks for sounds. I can't even do it, but there are multiple clicks in some of these languages. And there's at least one of those that was about to die out, and these two older women were the only ones that could speak the language, and one of their granddaughters got especially interested and has made videos. You can see videos now. This grandma established a school and is trying to preserve the language at this school, but thanks to wars and things like that, it's hard for her to keep the language going. And so I'm trying to write a book that has kind of a worldwide view of all the grandmas worldwide and the things that they do, ranging from being scientists to preserving languages and to all kinds of other stuff. My wife is a scientist at the University of Nebraska Medical Center now, She runs, and she's one of the two people that is behind the YES program here, where they bring Native American children to experience medical research and what it's like to be in medical school at the University of Nebraska. And the goal is to get some of them to become interested in sciences with the hope that they can become doctors and do the kinds of things that are going to cure cancer and the kind of things that my wife is doing now in her cancer immunology research and so forth. Well, I'm going to answer some questions here, but I can see some chats here. So if you want to post any questions that you have, I'd also like to know how many of you are children and how many of you are adults and grandmas and things like that. So hit the little button at the bottom that says reaction and then raise hand if you are a child, so I can know if there are any questions that are going to be coming from children.
Right. So if you just move your cursor down a little bit to wake up your screen, there's a smiley face that says reactions. And if you hover over that and click on it, there's a place to raise your hand. So will you be able to see all of those, James?
I don't think I can see the reactions. So
you may need to undo your share screen.
Yeah. Can you tell me how many you see? Can you look and see if any?
Let's see. It may take a moment for people to do this. You're asking for children, right?
Yeah, children, hit the raise hand. And if I want to know how many children there are, how many grandmas there are before I answer questions.
So it looks to me, I don't see any hands. So I'm thinking maybe we don't have children, but now I guess if you want to ask if people raise their hand about a grandma.
Hit a raise hand if you're a grandma then. Okay, a lot of grandmas. Fantastic. Oh, okay, the hands are showing up along my screen here. So yeah, so you have a lot more influence on the future than you realize, grandmas, because there are some scientists that found out that people's family trees spread a lot faster than anybody suspected. So there's this article in Scientific American, humans are all more closely related than we commonly think. And it's about this group of scientists that did a study showing that everybody on Earth is a descendant of one person in Asia who lived about 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, or a little more. And you think, well, that's impossible. One person in Asia as recently as 2,000 years ago, and that's a great, et cetera, grandma to everybody on Earth. It's how can that be? Well, there are a lot of things to overcome when you imagine that, but here's just the start of it. In the back of my book, you can see a child's view on just the start of that concept, and it shows how things quickly branch out into your past from one person. So we're going backwards. So this is a picture on the screen that I'm showing you. It has you, the child, on a heart in the middle. And then the mother is the orange heart around that. So the child is sitting on the lap of the mother, let's say. And then there's 2 grandmas in green there, 4 great grandmas in purple, 8 great grandmas in blue, 16 great grandmas, and we're already to 16 great grandmas, and you haven't really gone very far back in time. Well, you keep going, you go just 10 generations back from today, and you have more than 1,000 great to the multiples of grandmas just 10 generations back. It depends on whether your family is intermarried into itself. So it might not be 1,000, but if nobody has intermarried into the family, you would have 1,000 plus grandmas just 10 generations back. And when you keep going, I have a magnifying glass in the middle there on that original chart that I showed you. But if you go back just a few thousand years, in this chart that I've made here, each dot in this outer circle here stands for 20,000 grandmas at that moment in history. So that's what the outer circle is here. It's because of exponents doubling. Numbers double very fast, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. You get up into the millions very fast. So in fact, if you just keep doubling numbers, when you get back 1,000 years or so, you're in the billions with a B. And in fact, if you keep going back, all people today are descended from all people about 5,000 years ago or a little more who have living descendants. So everybody on Earth is more related than I think anybody really suspected. So whether your family is from Asia, Africa, whether you're indigenous to the United States, South America, places that you thought were very isolated, it just takes one person getting into an area, and then it multiplies or it blooms from 2, 4, 6, 8, and pretty soon everybody in that culture is a descendant of that one person. And it happens a lot faster than you would realize. So, and it goes the other way too. So if you end up being a great-great-grandparent to people generations from now, this is how long it takes to share the same great-great-great-great, etc. grandchildren with everybody else living today. So you're going to be a great, some families don't go on. I mean, if you don't have any children, then you won't be a great-grandparent to anybody. But if your family keeps spreading and merging with the other families around the world, it doesn't really take very long for you to be a great-grandparent to everybody on Earth. And the other grandparents that you're with today, they're going to be great-great-great-great-great-grandparents to everybody on Earth, just like you. So you're sharing those great-great, etc. grandparents with people that you don't know right now, or the great-great-grandchildren with people that you don't know right now in, say, Afghanistan or the Amazon rainforest or Greenland. Those grandparents there are going to share the same, this many greats, grandchildren with you. So I'm going to go into a little bit more after I answer some questions. So if anybody has any questions right now, you can post those.
So, yep, I just sent a message in the chat encouraging people to ask their questions. If you'd like to ask the question yourself without typing it in, if you would raise your hand again on the screen using the reaction button again, I'll try to monitor those too. At this point, James, though, we don't really have any questions yet. We've got a couple comments.
Okay.
Connie and Doug say, looking forward to sharing your book with my very first grandson. So that's obviously sort of a heartfelt thing that I've been thinking about too, because I'm a grandma as well.
Thank you.
So, yeah. In the meantime, let me just ask a question. I was thinking about how you mentioned that you're going to be illustrating your next book. And
Right.
I'm just wondering how you were able to make that happen, because we know that often writers don't get to choose the illustrators for their books, and there has to be like a common, you have to somehow come to a common agreement for how the illustrations are going to work with the text. And I'm just thinking, how were you able to do that, and how is that working for you?
Yeah, well, I finished the illustrations. I actually have just in the last week or so sent back the final art with corrections for Eat Your Woolly Mammoths. And it was something that I vowed never to do, actually, because um, when I first started writing It's Disgusting and We Ate It, I visualized that as a completely different style of art. And when I got it, I went, that is so much better than what I visualized. And I said to myself, I'm never going to try to illustrate my own books because it's two heads are better than one. The illustrator contributes something that multiplies with the writing. It's not like it's just, oh, here's the writing and here's a picture of the writing. They interact with each other and create something that's 10 times as good as each one separately. Uh, so time went on, and as usual with each one of my books, the editor chose the illustrator, and I had no say in it. Well, when Eat Your Woolly Mammoths came along, I wrote it, and my editor was kind of slow, so uh, she didn't make up her mind on an illustrator, and she said, well, maybe we're going to get Laurie Keller. And I thought, no, Laurie Keller's fantastic. I would love it if Laurie Keller illustrated this book. And by the way, Laurie Keller is the ex-girlfriend of Eric Brace, who illustrated It's Disgusting and We Ate It. So there would be a little bit of a full circle if Laurie was the illustrator of Eat Your Woolly Mammoths. Well, every editor, I don't know what they do because they have to have some like time warp machine because they couldn't do what they do in 24 hours a day. So things just kept going on, and they kept not uh, moving forward with the book, even though I had a contract. It was going to be published for sure. But gradually I said to myself, you know, I've seen Eric Brace's art. I think I have a better idea of how to illustrate it than I did when my first book came out, because this is a follow-up to It's Disgusting and We Ate It. So why don't I just show my editor something that I would do if I were the illustrator? And much to my surprise, she and the art director got back to me and said, oh, great, we'll let you illustrate the book. And so I'm sorry, Laurie Keller, but they chose me. Um, and the art director said, great job. And so they love what I did. And I'm the most surprised person of all because I vowed never to do that. And I actually um, continue to think that I'm going to mostly just write books and only occasionally illustrate a book. Um, but I can show you some of the art from Eat Your Woolly Mammoths. I did a school visit for some kids in Rapid City just a few days ago, and they were the first kids ever that got to see the art from Eat Your Woolly Mammoths. Now, the cover is a secret, but I'm revealing some of the interior stuff. So this is some of my art for Eat Your Woolly Mammoths. Um, so Eat Your Woolly Mammoths covers food from 2 million years ago to the future. So this is the Middle Ages right here. This is a king. He's going to eat a blackbird pie. So believe it or not, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie. That's based on reality from the Middle Ages. Uh, they would play jokes on people at royal banquets where they would bake a pie with flour inside, a giant pie. Then they would pour the flour out and stick living blackbirds inside it so that at the banquet they would cut it open and blackbirds would fly out. So I decided in my art I would draw some funny pictures and then combine them with real life pictures to see if it would create a contrast that people found funny. So here I drew a king, I drew a blackbird. I put the blackbird in a pie along with a picture of my lamp in the living room here and a photograph of our piano that my wife is great at playing. So that piano and the lamp are in the pie with the blackbird, and the blackbird is threatening the king. And if you can read what the king says with the screen sharing thing in the way, the king says, "I sure hope kings get to eat cupcakes, or I'm getting a new job." He doesn't want to eat blackbirds in the pie. Also, there's a painting um, of food that I incorporated into the image, and I put some streaks of highlight and shadow on the front of the tablecloth to make it look three-dimensional, but that's actually a painting uh, that I photoshopped in with a background and a king. The sketches looked like this, which my editor, to my surprise, approved. But I didn't just send sketches. I also sent a cover and finished interior art for one spread. And that's what really got her to publish the book, or choose me as the illustrator because she liked the cover, which is still a secret. And then there's the finished whole spread right there. So it has the famous poem, "Sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 24 blackbirds baked in a pie. When the pie was opened, the birds began to sing. Wasn't that a dainty dish to set before the king?" And then above that, how to make a joke pie full of live birds. It actually includes the recipe from 1559 on how to make a pie with living blackbirds inside. So the book continues to some more modern things like the invention of instant Jell-O, which is really interesting. So here's the page spread on the invention of instant Jell-O. I decided to take baseball cards from the early professional baseball period and pictures of women playing fairies with wings in opera from the same period. And then I was going to have a boys versus girls Jell-O fight where they're throwing Jell-O pies at each other because the history of Jell-O is so interesting. It starts with perfection salad. There was a Jell-O war going on basically between the cooks of the 20th century, starting in 1904, when somebody invented this delicious carrot, celery, vinegar, and cabbage Jell-O salad. People loved it so much they wanted to top that. And so they came up with cow tongue and Jell-O, Spam, pickles, pineapple juice, and cream in Jell-O, a fake pineapple made of Jell-O, olives, mayo, and liver sausage as we go forward in time. And in 1974, the cookbooks actually had liver, canned green beans, and artificial sweetener whipped into Jell-O as the next delicious thing that you could give to your family. So I'm still doing school visits, and I'm doing some for free. If I consider this a favor to the school too. If you'll give some free copies of one of my books to the students, then I'll do the school visit for free. Now back to questions, if you have any, because we're almost done here. Any questions about either one of my books that I've showed you pages from?
Yeah, no, people haven't put any questions in, but I'm sure that everybody has really enjoyed all of your, the grandma book was so endearing, and then some of these other ones are just so playful. It's kind of, I don't know, it's just always fun to hear authors read their own works and just have that opportunity here. Let's see, we've got one thing here. Connie and Doug say, how on earth did you find so many strange food facts? I think that's a really good question, because I think that children especially would like that part of the books.
Yeah. it's amazing because even after writing this book, and there's going to be a third weird food book that I've actually already written, and I'm finishing the art on that now. So it's a 3-book series of weird foods. Um, Even after I finished the third book, I'm constantly coming up with more weird foods. So I can't believe that people eat the things that they eat. And my third book is actually emphasizing the science of it and how so many of the things that people eat that we consider strange are very, very healthy and much more healthy than what Americans eat in reality. And we should go try some of those things. Um, and they're actually really tasty and yummy. And like, for example, spiders. Don't eat all types of spiders, but some types of spiders taste like shrimp and they're related to shrimp. And so you learn all kinds of things. And I interview people, I call scientists um, who've eaten woolly mammoth meat, for example, called them up, emailed them, asked them, can I use a photograph of your woolly mammoth that you dug up out of the ice? Uh, so you find things in all kinds of places.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we're about done here. I can see my window prism is making rainbow rays come out of me on the picture, which I wasn't anticipating, but I just wanted to explain to everybody that's not something I did here on purpose. But anyways, James, this has just been so wonderful. And on behalf of the South Dakota Humanities Council, I just want to thank you for coming and for sharing your stories with us and all the creative endeavors that you're working on. We want to thank all of our audience members on Zoom and on Facebook for participating and attending the event. And we hope that people can still take time to view as many more presentations as their schedule allows. So check out our website, sdbookfestival.com/virtual, and you'll get some more ideas about programming that's still to come. So James, before we leave each other, do you have any final remarks?
Well, if you can see my screen, I'm ending with a plug for independent bookstores in the upper Midwest. Can you see those bookstores?
Yep.
Okay. So I have Rapid City. I start with the Dakotas, and Omaha, where I live now, has a fantastic bookstore. Iowa City, I went to the University of Iowa Writers Workshop, and one of my classmates owns Prairie Lights now, which is a classic great bookstore. Go down the list and there's more. Just keep going to those places. Also, Rapid City's Books a Million has some autographed copies of my grandma book. And the last thing I want to say is this is from my great-grandma's autograph book from when she was a kid in 1889. One of her friends wrote, "Improve the minutes, for minutes make the hours. Your friend, Josie Thompson." This is Leland, Illinois, before they moved to the Dakotas. So thanks a lot. It was great talking to you, and hope to see you again in the future. Hope to speak again at the South Dakota Festival of Books.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks again, James. And we just have enjoyed sharing this time with you too. So, all right, everybody, well, have a great evening. And yeah, thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Bye-bye.